All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. I am Jack Allen. So today we're going a little bit different direction, not so much conspiratorial, but maybe it crosses the line. So this is King David. King David. Well, King David, would you like to be called David or King David?
Ooh, I don't have a preference. I actually like KD. KD's
Oh,
pretty
I
cool.
like that. I was
Rolls
going to
off the tongue.
suggest that.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, so KD, tell everyone a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So my name is King David. I'm the world's only quit porn strategist, and I help men in their porn addiction in 30 days or less. And that kind of sums up everything that I do.
Well, so how did you get into this? Like, dude, because it's such. I found your account. I think like 8 months ago I started following you.
Oh,
But
okay.
like, how did you get started doing this? Is such it's a
Right.
not a common choice.
Right. Absolutely, man. So I first started a Twitter account back in, I think, September of 2019. So at that time I was 19 years old. I'm actually only 22 years old. I know.
Wow.
It takes everybody by surprise. But I started my Twitter in September of 2019 with the original intent of just kind of spewing my thoughts out into the world and like seeing if I could amount a following, having no idea how to do it. Like the whole Twitter thing, like you get into what we call money Twitter, and it's very gamified, like very particular, like building and strategies and all that. And I remember following Jose Rosado, who at the time was talking about like how you can make money off of your Twitter account. And back in September of 2019 or like early 2020, I was a sales associate at a sporting goods store making $10 an hour.
Mhm.
So being told that I could make money online was very, very tempting. And the premise was, if you can solve a problem, you can write an ebook about it, and you can sell 5 ebooks every day at $20 a copy and make $100 a day. Which at that point, I'm like, $100 a day. That means I'd have to, back then I'd have to work 11 hours,
Right. Right.
to make difference with the tax.
Yeah.
So, and I was thinking, I'm like, well, what can I talk about? Because I was in money Twitter, but I was also in like the manosphere, so masculine self-improvement. And being a 20-year-old dude at this point in time, thinking like, well, what do I have to offer to everyone else when everyone's talking about either fatherhood or being a better husband, and me over here like, okay, I'm single and I live at home, and what have I done? And I thought, I'm like, oh, well, I quit porn because that was something that I had struggled with. And I mean, you can Google how to quit porn, and for the most part, a lot of articles will come out that will say like, here's what you need to do. And reflecting from my own personal story, when I was trying to quit, there was a lot of advice and a lot of different things that I tried that just simply did not work. So me in kind of this early entrepreneurial mindset, hearing like, oh, if you solve a problem, you can write a course on it and you can make money off of that. And I was like, okay, I'll just write an ebook. And it wasn't until like June, July of 2021 that I took on the self-proclaimed title of the world's only quit porn strategist. And when I really niched down into the quitting porn topic, because prior to that, I was kind of just talking about masculinity stuff in general, and it just so happened that I'd be like, hey, you should also probably quit porn. And now, I mean, you've been following me for a while. You've probably seen me tweet a number of times that I want to burn the porn industry to the ground, right? So I'm like effectively the quit porn guy on Twitter, which I think is really cool. And it all started because I followed Jose Rosado, and he's like, you can make money off of Twitter.
Wow,
I was like, no,
dude.
I was like, really? Here we are.
I love it, dude. Well, it's such a, I mean, masculinity and pornography, they're like they're linked, right? They're like totally
Right.
linked. So
Absolutely.
that seems like it's normal transition. Was there a reason why you chose, because you said you had an issue with pornography? Is that why, or how
Right.
did that decision happen?
So it was kind of been like, I'm thinking to myself, like, what is a big problem that I solve that I know a lot of other people solve with? Because I mean, it doesn't, if you ask the homie, right, like, hey, do you watch porn? They're either going to be like, oh, yeah, I watch porn. Who doesn't watch porn? Or they'll, look at the ground and kind of twiddle their toes and like, oh, yeah, I watch it. So knowing and like having my own friends that had struggled with it, and also having had accountability partners that were dudes that I was close to. So I knew it was like a problem, and I knew it was like a prominent issue. I'm also religious, but I took the angle with my content to like remove religion for it, right? Because you can only be told you need to pray more and read your Bible more so much before you realize, like, okay, I need to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also, and that's a whole nother topic, right? And I think this is just kind of my own, rant topic, right? But I don't think the church in general does very well with the topic of addiction. I think all too often they'll say, like, oh, you have a God-sized hole that you're trying to fill with, like, porn or drugs or alcohol. And that kind of neglects the fact that there are a lot of strong Christians and just other people that are religious that struggle with vices, and they read and they pray, and they don't get off of it. So that was an important thing for me, going through my own experience and like kind of doing the market research, like what needs to be said in a quit porn ebook that's actually going to help people.
Yeah.
And I knew, like, okay, I have to omit religion from this. And even like if you're trying to build a product, one thing you do is you go to your Amazon book reviews and you look at the 3 to 4 star ratings. And there are a lot of books out there that were written by like pastors or other religious figures that said, oh, well, if you're not religious, you can read this and you'll still get stuff out of it. And the comments were like, I read this as an atheist and I got nothing out of it. Like they literally said, you just need to become a Christian.
Right.
I'm like going through this. I'm like, oh, well, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of this So the biggest thing though, right, for me, it was like, okay, that was really the only thing at that point in time that I even had like the confidence to speak on, because it was like, that was something that I knew, that was something that I had done, something that I could relay. And of course, as my knowledge pool has expanded, even over just the past 2 years, from being surrounded by other prominent figures in the quote unquote manosphere, or just kind of masculine self-improvement. Like if you want to talk online business, if you want to talk relationships, if you want to talk sexual transmutation, or like even shout out to the Prometheus, the attachment bro, I think on TikTok, Adam Lane Smith, he talks about attachment, different attachment styles people have. So that's something that I've ventured more into, because that's applicable to my one-on-one clients that I work with. But back then it was like, okay, what's the one thing that I'm like confident enough to actually turn into an ebook?
Yeah.
And the ebook got to the point where people are like, hey, you could do coaching on this. And then I was like, oh, I guess I could do coaching on this. And I remember the very first client that I signed on, I was actually super hungover on that very first call, which I was like, talk about bad first impressions, but I still managed to like, sign them on at that point in time. And thinking from like people, like from a business, like a coaching business.
Yeah.
When I did that, I had no idea what I was doing. All I knew was like, okay, we're going to talk about quitting porn and apply stuff in my masterclass to him and his situation. And ever since then, like from there, I would sign on more clients. And I got to the point where I was able to really systematize the process of quitting porn. And, at that point in time, I work with clients for 3 to 4 months. Now I can have people off of porn in 30 days or less.
Wow, dude, and people don't realize like how bad this stuff is. Cause we were just talking, you just said, I tried before the show, I wanted to like pull up statistics. So like if we wanted to refer to those. And so I Google like negative effects of porn, and literally I had to scroll all the way down to get, there was maybe 1 out of like the 20 suggestions was the negative facts. And that's why I think it's so surprising to so many men, why either their partner gets upset at them or that it's even bad. Because I mean, there was BBC article after and other mainstream media sources saying, this is so good for you. This isn't bad for you. This is normal. Like it's insane. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I even remember, I think scrolling through like 9gag back in my high school days, and for whatever reason, a link to an article or something came up talking about like the benefits of masturbating in and of itself. And the 2 ones that I remember like most prominently were, it will help you sleep if you masturbate and have an orgasm. And then the other one was, it'll clear up your sinuses. And like, there's a lot of dudes that they will have trouble falling asleep if they don't watch porn and masturbate. Right. So that was like one of those first kind of pro porn content that I found that then became more of a justification to keep doing it. Cause it was like, oh, well, if this has positive benefits, then why would I stop? And then if you want to talk negative benefits of porn, it does take a while to kind of dig and find them. But I like to tell people like it's multifaceted. So it affects people on 5 different planes of existence. It affects them mentally, it affects them spiritually, physically, emotionally, and energetically. A lot of people won't understand, like, oh, if you quit porn, you will have more energy, more confidence, and higher self-esteem than you've ever had before. But they don't have a point of reference because the average age of exposure to internet porn is 12 years old.
Isn't that
And as time goes
crazy?
on, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I found it at 9. I've worked with dudes who found it as young as 6.
Wow, dude.
Yeah. That's a traumatic experience.
Yes, dude. I mean, and I made this example before. It's harder to get an R-rated movie ticket than it is to watch pornography on the internet.
Right. Yeah.
And again, it just shows no one sees an issue with this. So I know it's a plan, because any rational person would say, no, I don't want my 11-year-old son to be looking at adults fornicating on the internet.
Right. Absolutely. And even, so even going into it from like the religious perspective, always like knew this is probably not right. Like I knew it was a sin, because you get into like lust. You're not supposed to lust after a woman you're not married to. And so like consciously knowing it was wrong, but that never being like the resolve to know like, oh, this is actually like probably not good for me. I think it was at the ripe old age of 17 that I realized I was starting to have problems getting it up on my own,
right,
without the aid of porn. And like, you're 17,
right.
That is not okay.
The wind
That
should
is
be
not okay. Right. You should like hold hands with the chick and be like ready to go.
Well, dude, I'll just share this or this little graph I have, but 12% of the websites that are on the internet are pornography.
I actually think it's closer to like 36%.
Wow, dude. So
or 36% of all internet downloads, I know for sure, is pornographic content.
And it said every second $3,000 is being spent on pornography a day. Like it's like Brian in the chat said, it's all like a drug addiction, and it is a drug addiction. But again, it's the society saying, no, it's okay, do this. And the negative side effects are, like you just said, as a 17-year-old, you were struggling with things that you shouldn't have been struggling with as a 17-year-old.
Right.
And how many marriages has it ruined?
Yes, absolutely.
The people that you talk to, do they come to you when it's like reached the boiling point? Have you found like they're, the issue, like they hit the rock bottom of problems, or is there a little bit of both, like people just trying to stop?
So I've worked with a very broad clientele. The youngest individual I worked with was 18. The oldest individual I worked with was 57. He was also a pastor of a church, which is a very rewarding experience. He's actually one of my favorite clients that I ever worked with. Love that guy. Great experience with him. But typically what I end up seeing is it tends to be dudes in their mid to late 20s who on the surface have everything going for them, but they know that porn is the one like they know deep down that porn is the one thing that's preventing them from living the life that they know they should be living, because they don't have the confidence they want, they don't have the energy they want, they don't have the self-esteem they want. Some of them, they're single and they know that porn is preventing them from building a healthy relationship and healthy attachment. For some of them, it's also like I'm working with a guy right now. He's in a relationship and he wants to get married, and he's heard enough of the horror stories to know like porn ruins marriages. Porn addiction ruins marriages. And he does not under any circumstance want to bring that into an engagement. And there's also a lot of, you'll get kind of more of the base trad chicks, right? That'll be like outright, like, I'm not dating you if you're addicted to porn. And my own take on that, right, is I think it is proper for a woman to put that boundary in place. Like, yeah, you don't have to date someone if they're addicted to porn. That being said, if you're in a relationship with someone, like if by chance someone is in a relationship with someone addicted to porn, my advice is always to offer support and encouragement, and try to, because this is one of the nuances of porn addiction, right, is you've probably seen me tweet this before, like, you don't watch porn because you're horny, you watch porn because you're hurting. Just because you're looking at sexually erotic and visually arousing stimuli does not mean that you are looking to porn to get off. The way that I relate it to people is you're experiencing a buildup of negative emotional tension. And over the years, you've wired your only response to negative emotional tension to seek out a physical release of tension, right? Because we all know that like ejaculating is the release of physical tension that builds up within us. And it's also going to be said, like, the body has a very hard time distinguishing between anxiety and arousal. And stress
Interesting.
is also a physical tension that we can feel. I've been to the point of stressed out where it's like, oh, I can actually feel this in my chest,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
like knowing that that's a physical tension, but it stems from emotional. Well, there's also physical stressors, but what ends up happening is the addiction, because all addiction, I mean, addiction is multifaceted, right? It's a neurochemical dependency. So within addiction, there's either a foreign chemical that is being introduced that's releasing or that has a prominent chemical response in the brain. So in the case of nicotine, you're introducing a foreign substance that has a chemical reaction in the brain that increases like dopamine and other reward neurotransmitters. But in the case of porn, it is hijacking a system that's already present in the brain, but then puts it on steroids. So one of the mechanisms that's referenced with like porn addiction is the Coolidge effect. From a primal perspective, we as men are geared to, or like back at like way back when, right? The whole thing was we wanted as much genetic variety as possible. So we were wired to look at attractive women and be like, oh, you are fertile, your genes are good, just based off of the physical attraction.
Right.
Then we'd
Right.
go do our thing and we'd produce offspring. So you get to porn, right? Where think of it like your ancestors, you have seen more, well, I mean, most guys have watched porn, which is the
Right.
unfortunate
Right.
reality.
Yes. Yeah.
Most dudes have seen more naked women on Google Images than all of their ancestors combined. I mean, at the
That's
end of the
true.
day, and think of it like each picture you see, that's a hit of dopamine. And it's just priming the pump. So that's also one reason why it's addictive, because it takes advantage of those systems in the limbic system, and then it hijacks the reward system, or the mesolimbic dopaminergic reward system, which is where the addiction forms, right? Because your brain is like, oh, I got dopamine from that, I should do it again. And then you do it again and again and again and again. You become more accustomed to it. And of course, then you build a tolerance where the more dopamine that's released, and the more dopamine receptors your brain retracts, because it's like, oh my goodness, this is more than I know what to do with. Let's take some of those away. And then that gets to the point where it's like, all right, the vanilla titty pics you started with no longer do it for you. Now you're watching some pretty messed up stuff that
Right.
like you would never want to replicate, you'd never want to pursue. That if you saw it in person, you'd be like, oh, what am I looking at? But then you gotta go to Google Images and you're like, yeah, this is the good stuff. Very self-deceptive.
Well, I saw a statistic. It was like kids, I think you said the average age was 11 or whatever, the starting age. And eventually they start gravitating within months or years, they start getting to more and more intense stuff like that you were just talking about, that stuff that you would never take part in.
Right.
And we wonder why we have like an epidemic of not having enough children, or divorce rates are through the world, and all these abuse things, all this stuff. And a lot of it, I think, could probably be tied back to the pornography that these people watched as teenagers, their most impressionable years.
Oh, yeah. No, I absolutely agree. Porn is evil. And quick distinction, I say porn itself is evil, not necessarily the men are watching or the women. That's also, unfortunately, more and more common. Porn is evil. The industry deserves to be burned to the ground, as I've stated many, many times, and anybody who follows me will know, like, I despise it. But like I said, if a man, if you are trying to quit porn, then more power to you. I think you're doing the best thing that you can do for yourself. And I know for a fact that, quitting porn was the first step that I took towards really actualizing and bringing my best life about. And I've worked with dudes who they quit porn and then they break through and they accomplish so much more.
Wow.
So much more.
What's your take, dude, on, I wonder, I'm going to look when you're talking, but like OnlyFans is another epidemic of young women.
Right.
What's like your take on all of that? Because clearly, again, I mean, there is millions. I'm going to look up how many, but what's your take on that huge epidemic as well? I know it relates to pornography, but.
So there's a few interesting things that go on with OnlyFans, and like the dynamic is different with OnlyFans than it is with watching porn, because what's like from the user's perspective, right, of like the dude who's engaging with OnlyFans, is it's essentially a pseudo girlfriend, because not only with OnlyFans are you able to look at naked women, you're able to make special requests. You're able to interact with the conversations. I know like ratings are very common for dudes to send their own photos and have the chick reply back to. It's the, you can pay a woman a certain amount of money and she'll have a casual conversation with you. So what this speaks to is like the root for a lot of dudes. They watch porn for the emotional reasons, and one of those emotional reasons often stems from like loneliness, right? So they're craving intimacy. And despite the fact that porn, like an addiction to porn often has nothing to do with sex itself, you're still watching people perform an intimate act, even if porn has degraded that to such a strong extent. I refer, it's the illusion of intimacy. So what's happening is dudes are watching porn and there's that remnant that thinks like, oh, I'm doing this, right? Because our perception is our reality. The subconscious mind has a very, very hard time differentiating between what it sees, what it imagines, and real life. Okay. So as far as your subconscious mind is aware, the porn you watch is your lived experience. And there's also things that are happening in the brain when you watch porn. For example, the lateral orbital frontal cortex, which is part of the brain that's responsible for logical thinking and rational decision making, shuts down when you watch porn. It also shuts down when you watch sex, which is very important because, like, let's be honest, if you're having sex, who wants to be thinking about anything other than sex, right? That's great. That's how it's supposed to be. But when you're watching porn, self-destructive behavior ensues. And, like, the honest truth is porn is one of the easiest drugs to stop yourself from using because all you have to do is click an X button. But no one thinks to do that because it's a logical thought. So with OnlyFans, it is facilitating this kind of fake girlfriend dynamic because you could be the most boring dude who only plays video games, only works, only watches movies, and like has no conversational skills. And you could text a chick, and you're like, "Hey, what's up?" And she could be all happy and engaged, and you could be like super, like just dry texting in general. Mm-hmm. And under normal circumstances, a woman who values her time, if the dude's like, "Hey, what's up?" Like, those are texts we ignore. If someone DMs me, "Hi," I'm like, "Okay, nice." Like I don't have time for this. I cannot respond to you if you just say hi to me.
Right.
So even more so for women. But with OnlyFans, if you're paying her, she's kind of inclined to message back. So it sets a lot of false perceptions. And then, of course, OnlyFans is sold as this great financial haven for women. They're like, I've seen tweets, right, where it's like 19-year-old girls who are like, "Oh, I'm a homeowner," and then you click on the bio and she's got an OnlyFans. So there are some OnlyFans creators that make a lot of money off of it. But I think even on this website that you're on, I was actually looking at this when I was formulating my thread not the other day.
Oh, that's awesome.
One of the statistics is the average amount of revenue that an OnlyFans creator brings in.
There, $151 per month.
Yeah, there you go.
But you see, and isn't that insane? That's the average content creators, what they're making a month, $151. But this narrative is pushed like these girls, it'll say like top whatever, top.
Right.
And I think I saw it on somebody's post. It might have even been yours, but it was like this. They showed an example. This girl said like top 30% of content creators, and they showed like what she made, and she made something pathetic, like $85, and she was the top 30%. So how many people? It's like the NBA or podcasting or whatever. Only that top 0.1% actually make enough to have a living, I would think.
Right. Yeah, it's even like on Twitter, right? Like if you have more than 2,000 followers, you're in the top 1% of Twitter accounts. More than 2,000 followers, which for other social media platforms is a very, very low threshold to break. But Twitter, you get past the 2,000, you're basically home free. It's only a matter of time before you get to bigger numbers. So yeah, OnlyFans is kind of sold as this like great way for women in college to make money without having to do an awful lot of work. So then there's also going to be, there's massive repercussions of the OnlyFans epidemic, right? Where I've seen like, I think you've got accounts on Twitter, love the account, but like OnlyFans girls posting their L's online or stuff like that. Right. And they will like objectively unattractive women will be so upset that they're not making money on OnlyFans because they're sold this idea that they should be rich purely because they're posting unexposed ass on the timeline with a $5 a month subscription behind it. And like, sex sells, but it's got to be sexually appealing.
Right.
You know, like, it's like, unless, I mean, of course, then you can get into like fetish size stuff where objectively unattractive people are considered attractive, but that's because their brains have gotten to the point where it's like they're messed, you know, they're like, oh, this is what I need, because you've desensitized yourself to the natural stuff. So that's also, I mean, that's more of like a heartbreaking aspect, right? Because that's the whole, like, as people, we should be promoting a healthy lifestyle. That's one reason why I tell dudes to quit porn, because it's not healthy behavior. But health is so much more than just breaking free from your vices. And like, say what you want, but physiognomy doesn't lie. If your appearance is healthy, if you look good, you probably feel good, and it probably means you're healthy. You know, so those things can be fixed. Right. We can become more attractive, but we live in a society, right? We live in a society where you're fine the way that you are. And it's like, if you're
right.
You know, many such cases.
Such cases. Well, the also horrible thing about it is you get young girls who their brains aren't, you know, ever. It seems like this, at least the maturization rate or whatever. Like, we are all maturing later, so much later in life than maybe like our grandparents. But you have this 21-year-old girl who's attractive, and she says, you know, oh, I'm saying no to society. I'm going to start an OnlyFans. Those pictures are forever. You know, we all make mistakes, but now you may mature at some point, and you want a husband who's not a porn watcher, who would not subscribe to your OnlyFans. And many men will not be able to look past that you or a job or whatever you do in life. Those pictures are there forever.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's one of those things that it's just, it's very, very hard to look past. Very hard to look past. And I think dudes even are going to have to come to terms with that too, right? Like, if you have a history watching porn, like, it's fair grounds for chicks to be a little skeptical, because there are massive repercussions that come from porn addiction, where it does take time to, like, you can absolutely quit porn in a very short period of time. I've seen it happen. I've helped it happen. But there are repercussions on the brain and even just your perception of sex that are going to be long lasting. Like, I still have the image of the very first sexually explicit content that I ever saw that like got me started on it. Like, I can reload that picture in my brain.
Same.
I can see it right now. And I was like 9 years old.
Right.
At least I think I might have even been closer to 8. I think it was like 9. But, you know, so what ends up happening, right? So remember, I went back and I said, our perception is our reality. The subconscious mind, we cannot see things, or if we have not seen it, it's very hard for us to kind of like visualize it or conceptualize it. So with sex, for example, if you have not had sex and you've watched porn, when you think of sex, you are explicitly going to be thinking of pornographic content that you've seen. And for the most part, porn is produced and edited and staged and all that. Like, it's very, very fake. So there's a lot of just even more, let's say, body dysmorphia that can be caused by looking at porn. But then there's also the fact that what's happening is it's desensitizing dudes, because we are for the most part visually stimulated, right? It used to be you see a pair of boobs and you're like,
right,
you know, anymore it's like, oh, okay, well, like, let me see like 55 more boobs or whatever to get the same effect. So what's happening is it's wiring our brains for a digital polygamous. It's this weird, like, I mean, it's sad, right? Like, you get to the point where you should be content with, or well, okay, so they've done like animal studies, which is kind of interesting to relate this to. But they've done a study where it's like a rat. They have a male rat and a female rat in a cage. The female rat will go after the male rat will go after the female rat, and they'll do their thing as many times as possible. And sooner or later, it gets to the point where the male rat gets exhausted, not as interested, and ends up and will last a lot longer because he's used to that.
Okay.
And in the study, they will take the female rat away, give a new one, and the little homie is like ready to go, tearing it up, and will keep going at it and at it and at it, and will not last as long as the last one. But then what'll happen is sooner or later he gets to the point where he needs a new one. So with men, right, we do have that aspect of us where as time goes on with the woman that we choose to give ourselves to, things are going to take longer. But that's also, that's good, and that's kind of how it's supposed to happen. But with porn, it's like, oh, I'm tired of this. Let me look at something new. Oh, this is no longer exciting. Let me look at something new. Right? Again, I mean, I remember from my own experience, right? It wasn't like I'm staring at one picture.
No.
Like I'm rapid fire scrolling through that. I'm not settling on anything. It's like, oh, that looks good. That looks good. That looks good. And then you get to like a video, and I'm like a 20-minute video. Are you kidding me? I don't got time for that. You wait and you find the one bit, and you're like, yeah, this is it. So that has massive repercussions on relationships and a healthy sex life, because we are supposed to be with one person, or as few people as possible. And now you can go to porn and see as many people as possible. So what ends up happening, right? And this is one reason why relationships are so damaged. And this is thanks to porn, and then also just dating apps and social media.
Yes.
But we have this terrible sense of FOMO because we have effectively seen the most attractive that you can possibly get to thanks to the internet. They're like, it used to be right that we'd be headed over heels for the girl next door. Right. But now we know there's this bombshell baddie who's tearing it up in Russia or whatever. And we're like, there's better out there, man. Like, so that's terrible for relationships, because we're always wondering like, oh, well, and even with like dating apps, right? You're just scrolling. It could be a swipe away. Until you find someone who's like that much more attractive. Yeah. And of course, we're neglecting the fact that a relation, like attraction, should just be the metric of which you decide I'm interested in enough to figure out what this person is like under the surface, right? Like if you think someone's hot, great, that's awesome. Then you now have clearance to like go figure out like, okay, do I like their personality? Do they have a personality? Any more people don't have personalities, which is so crazy. And then like figure out like, okay, do they have skills? How do they handle things under pressure? Are they a good person? Are they a bad person? And like, I believe, right, the physical attraction, especially for a dude, like, do not get yourself in a relationship with a chick that you do not find attractive, because you're supposed to give all of yourself to her. And that means like, you should want her emotionally, physically, spiritually, energetic, like every aspect you can want her, you should want her. And if you are withholding any part of that, that's selfish, because there's someone else who's going to. So I have always used attraction as like the metric of like, okay, they're attractive. Let's see what else. Like, let's see if we jive. And anymore, it's like, oh, well, like she's like a 9.7, but I know there's a 10 out there somewhere. So let's hold the fort down until we get to the 10, which oftentimes is a highly unrealistic expectation that we set for ourselves.
Dude, that was such a good point, that FOMO. And for people that don't know, I mean, everyone should fear of missing out. But I think that has plagued young men, especially with social media, not even porn, for the last, I mean, look how many women and men aren't in relationships by 30, because they're living this life of drinking and going out and partying, just hooking up with girls, never settling down, because just like you said, they're thinking like, oh, maybe I could do better. I don't want to limit myself.
Right.
And that's not like that's a created, propagandized like mindset. It's from social media and movies and TV. That's how you're a man, by sleeping with as many women. And that propaganda is so powerful. And we're taught that from so young. Like, that's what I thought when I went to college. That's how I showed I was cool or something, was drinking and women, when it made zero sense. Like, it just, it's dangerous behaviors that never lead to anything good.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We have this masculinity crisis where we've been told that the wrong things are masculine. But now the inverse is true, where we're told that our masculinity is just outright toxic. Which of those is worse? Like, oh, you're not a real man if you don't drink beer. It's like, I like a craft beer just as much as the next guy, but I call it quits after one or two because it's going to affect my sleep. And there's a good chance I'm going to wake up with these aches and pains in my calves. And I really don't like that. But like, and then like, you're told like, oh, well, you don't like beer? Like, well, hey, I have my boundaries. But so we're told now, like, our masculinity is toxic, right? Like, to the outright, like, just not even like the supposed, the more testosterone you have, the more aggressive you are. Well, actually, the truth is, the more testosterone you have, the more emotional control you have. So the more control over your emotions you're able to exhibit.
Right.
And anymore, it's like any aspect of your masculinity is like is dangerous. It's a threat. And so that's terrible. There are terrible standards that are applied to men, and we're told our masculinity is toxic, but we're still expected to kind of carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. And what ends up happening, and this is one reason why addiction is so prevalent in men, is you reach the point where after your busy workday, you literally do not have any time or energy left over other to indulge in drugs or watch porn, because you're so drained, you're so beaten down that it's like, I only have time to throw back a few shots or smoke a J or watch the Hub, because it's like I gotta wake up in the morning. So what ends up happening is dudes are so stressed out and they don't have adequate time to deal with that stress, and they're also told that it's either it's wrong for them to work through their emotions, because guys aren't the only emotions men have are hunger and anger, which are two important emotions, but they're not the only ones. But then the inverse is told, like, if you're, so then just the outright, like, emotional regulation, which is one thing that I teach my one-on-one clients, right, is emotional regulation, emotional stability, because like that has to be learned. Like, I had a dude that I worked with who, he told me, like, he cried for the very first time in years during our 31 days together, because I taught him how to tap back into his emotions and how to actually feel that and how to actually regulate. Yeah, absolutely. So that's another side of this, right? And that's just kind of on the masculinity topic, but it feeds directly into addiction, because we're like, hey, I don't have time to do these other things. And then also it's propagandized that these things are good for us, which is very common with marijuana right now. Very common.
Great point. Yes. Well, dude, I just did a show on feminism, and that was all created through Rockefeller money and all these think tanks. And the one great point that I read in there was, so they want to effeminate men. This has been a decade-long goal. And the reason that this author proposes that is that women often choose men like their father. So if your father is a feminized man, lacks, he's maybe a male feminist, you're going to marry a man that's even more so like that father. And the goal is to either have everyone being gay or homosexual, so to lower population, or that you just have no difference between the male and the female species, and everyone is the same exact thing, that perfect utopia. And I found that that made so much sense to me, because that's literally what's happening, right?
Yeah, no, and forced androgyny is very, very harmful.
Yeah.
There are even times, like, I have two younger sisters, and there have been times I've told them outright, like, because they'll do this with clothing. Very common for them to do this with clothing, and I've told them, like, you look like a boy, you look like a lesbian. That is not feminine. You need to change that right now. So I'm very open. I'm trying to help curate that sense.
What's their response to
that? Usually they will be a little stingy about it. But I think that's just kind of like, because I'll just be like blunt and, like, kind of metaphorically hit them over the head with it. But I've also noticed that has a very strong impact. And like my one sister, like I have a 17-year-old sister and I have a 14-year-old sister. My 14-year-old sister is more in like sports and athleticism, so her clothing is more athleisure. But my one sister who's 17, she does dress a lot more femininely now. Like I've seen her primarily in skirts in the warmer weather than I have in like shorts, which is typically more feminine dress wear, and then even more like sundresses and things like that. And I'll also tell them too, with stuff like crop tops or like high riding shorts, where I'm like, hey, you don't want to wear that. Like, that is not signaling, because that goes back to what I mentioned prior, right? With like our physical appearance as an indicator of our health. And it's also going to be an indicator of like our emotional health as well as our physical health. And if we do not take care of ourselves, because I mean, your physical appearance, the things that you wear send a very strong message.
Yeah.
Send a very strong message. So I try to convey that to them as well, because if you can make the sexes look the same, you're not too far off from meshing them together and then having a
Ooh.
very hard time differentiating. Because if a dude can wear a skirt and it effectively makes him a woman, then what the hell does it mean to be a woman?
Right.
Right. And of course, I mean, I've got really long hair, so oh, the mirror's flipped. I don't know what I'm
No,
doing.
I saw
But
in
I've
your
got really
profile,
long
you got a
hair.
good mane of head, or good head of hair.
Yeah, thank you. So I always get to kind of keep people like, oh, you talking about masculinity that you got a man butt? I'm like, yeah, I do. I feel more masculine with my long hair. What are you talking about? I actually think it's better for the energy.
I like it, dude. Yes, I like you got the beard and the long hair. I think it's a good
the
look,
Viking look. Thank you,
dude. I
thank
think
you.
it's a good look. Well, so like I know I think you said the youngest guy you talked to was 17, but I always talk about this as well. Like I couldn't imagine being a 13-year-old straight white man boy growing up, because everybody's telling you how horrible you are as a person
Right.
inherently. You could have done nothing, but you are inherently evil.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you're like maybe a little weak-willed or self-conscious, it's just easier to join a group. So
Right.
and it's some reason all the groups they join have a lot of degenerate behaviors. They
Mm-hmm.
don't join like physical fitness group, they join a
Right.
male feminist group, and all of these things seem to go back to these same things of like pornography and drug usage and just degenerate behaviors.
Right.
And you said that was the youngest guy you had, right?
Yeah, youngest guy that I worked directly with was 18.
Okay.
And I did at one point in time, because I have like my setup is you go to my landing page, you fill out an application. And there was one point in time where I had someone filled out an application. It said 13 years old.
Wow.
And I was like, 13, like he's not going to be able to afford the program, because the call is kind of like, that's where we're talking about things
Right.
getting started. And I was like, I'm gonna just talk to this kid about it. And I talked to him, and one of the questions I asked him was like, you've never talked to anybody else about this before, have you? And he's like, no, I haven't.
Wow.
So I ended up giving him, I asked him, hey, do you have WhatsApp or Telegram? And he goes, I have WhatsApp. So I added him on WhatsApp, and then I gave him access to some of the course content. I was like, go through this. Gave him kind of an impromptu call on that. And like, I messaged him a few weeks later. I'm like, hey, how you doing? He's like, I don't want to watch it anymore. It's like, it's working. So unofficially worked someone at the age of 13. But at that point, it was just, me being like, bro, this is what you got to do. It ain't hard. Stuff ain't hard. So yeah, youngest age was 13. And I have a friend who is a youth pastor out in Eastern Texas area. And because I was mentioning earlier, I was like, I'd love to like meet up with you in person. Texas is a little ways away but one day we'll be in the Texas area.
Yeah.
But he talks often with his youth group about like porn and the dangers of it. And like the harsh reality is like young dudes are watching porn.
Oh yeah.
And it's terrible. And like, I even told my sister that, and she kind of made her upset. I was like, because she's talking to this dude, and I'm like, 99% sure he watches porn. She's like, no, I've talked to him. I've asked him.
Oh yeah,
like, he's not going to tell you the truth about that. No, he will. I'm like, no, he's not going to tell you the truth about that.
No.
So, and that's that's a whole nother thing. So you've got, because it's just the relationship stuff gets messy. But for young dudes, absolutely right. It's like they are a threat, a menace to society. Their masculinity is toxic, and then they get wrapped up in the wrong groups, and they start, living out the wrong behaviors. And the next thing you know, they get to the age of like 25, and they're this very effeminate creature, if you will. And it's like, they don't know anything about anything. Like you talk to them, and they sound like women, they dress like women, they're over. It's a crisis. It's horrible. But like, you can kind of spot it out. Like it's not too hard to tell if a dude watches porn. Like
I totally agree, dude. It's weird how they've been able to tie like empowerment with like nudity and dressing very promiscuous.
Right.
And I love how they'll refer like, oh, back when, women had to wear a dress, we were so repressed. And it's like, it's amazing the propaganda they were able to tie this, like, oh, you're truly empowered. There was an awesome quote. It's like, I'm going to butcher it. So it doesn't, but empowerment is freedom and self-restraint is
Mhm,
like, restricting you. It's an
mhm.
amazing. Have you done like any research did porn, right? I guess right when the internet started, porn was prevalent on it.
Yeah, as soon as people could take pictures or as soon as people could make art, there was, nude art. That being said, porn is classified as something created with the intent of arousing the viewer. So like, we've had paintings of nude women for as long as
Right.
possible.
Right.
There's etches,
Yes.
fertility goddesses found in like the ancient Ur and Sumerian societies. Then so yeah, as soon as people could take pictures, they're taking pictures of naked women. And then you get to internet porn, where, and this is one thing that a lot of people miss. This is one thing a lot of people miss. So the blue light that our screens emit are very, very stimulating. And that's also going to contribute to the dopamine that's released in our brain. So we're
Mhm.
effectively like, I mean, the bright colors, the notifications, and like even it's like social media, they all know how the brain works and how it responds to these kinds of things. So our devices are created to be addictive because that's how they're going to make money off of us. That's how they're going to even propagandize us. So what ends up happening is you've got the blue light coupled with the fact that the nude images are going to elicit a neurochemical response in the brain and also a primal response in the brain that's going to like gear you towards like wanting more and more and more of it.
Yeah.
So because like it wasn't that like you used to like big difference between looking at a Playboy versus going to
Ooh.
Google Images looking at your specific type or
Mm.
whatever it is that you're into,
Yeah.
right? Like the dopamine load, very, very different there. um Pro tip: anybody, like, if you don't sleep well, totally not affiliated with the company. I love them super much, but Raw Optics makes the best blue light glasses I've ever used. And if you don't sleep well,
Wow.
please, 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 please get blue light blocking glasses.
We got to get
You
you a
want to get
promo code.
I know they do. They really do. If you want to get on the esoteric health benefits of blue light, the reason why it's super important is because blue light mimics natural sunlight. And when we are in natural sunlight, it signals to the brain to inhibit the production of melatonin. Melatonin is the sleep hormone. So when it's released, it makes us tired. When we're exposed to blue light, it's not released, doesn't make us tired. And melatonin is also it's the fuel for the mitochondria, right? And if our mitochondria suck, we suck because those bad boys
Hmm.
are the powerhouse of the cell.
Interesting.
So wear blue light blocking glasses,
Well, and now
especially after sunset.
well, I have some cheap ones, but now I'm gonna have to look into those because I look at a
Yeah.
computer all day for work. So
Oh yeah, dude. Sleep quality. Like the biggest reason I got it was because um, after I got off of weed, I kind of replaced that habit with like binge watching Netflix in the evening, and like I would be up so late and my head would hurt so much afterwards because I'd be staring in a television for so long. I ended up getting a pair of the blue light glasses because I was like, I gotta like not be exposed because you can't download a blue light filter on a TV unless you plug a computer into it.
right.
And that being said, blue light's still going to escape through those. So, and that's even like, and I'm familiar with the various like addictions. I've studied it very extensively, and one reason why my stuff works so well is because I've looked at addiction from this. Like porn addiction is not regarded as an addiction. I think, actually, I think it was just recently classified by one of those diagnostic manuals,
Mhm.
not the big one that people go to for psychology,
Right.
but it was just I think like compulsive sexual internet behavior, something like that. New thing, so like it's starting to get more recognition finally, but it's not really regarded as an actual addiction. So that's one
Oh
reason why the science
no.
is kind of all over the place. From more of like a like I hate when people are like source. I'm like, brother, you want sources? What is this 2019? We don't believe in sources are voting anymore. Like,
Right, dude. Well, I mean, sources are gonna. It reminds me a lot like the tobacco industry because I remember seeing one for my feminist article. Porn in 2021 made something like $42 billion. It made more money than NBC, ABC
mm-hmm,
put together. Well, if they're making this much money, do you think they're going to fund a study to to show
right,
the harms of it? No,
right,
absolutely not. They're just going to
yeah,
pump out why it's okay. And I know we already mentioned this like 4 times, but literally when you Google this, it's difficult to find a reason
it
why
is,
not to watch porn.
it is
It's just
going harder and
literally
harder.
insane.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's nuts. Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff that goes into it. Like myself, I struggled with porn addiction from I first saw it at like age 9. I finally got off of it right before turning 20, which would have been January. So
Awesome.
my birthday's in late January, so it was like January 2020 where I was like, all right, final nail in the coffin. And then shortly after then, because like I had, some of my friends were kind of a little bit of potheads. They're like, oh yeah, you should try it. The tricky part, everybody talks about weed being the gateway drug. No, 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 no. Nicotine is the gateway drug, in my honest opinion. I never would have drank underage or smoked had I not already been familiar with the buzz that nicotine gives you. It's very short-lived, but it's on par with a really nice nicotine buzz. You'll feel like you're drunk out of your brain for like a solid 15 seconds.
Right.
It's also one of the most addictive substances on the planet. You are statistically more likely to quit crack cocaine cold turkey than you are nicotine. So I ended up finding nicotine. I got on nicotine around sometime when I was 18. So there was a while where I was kind of dual using between porn and nicotine. And then I recently got off of nicotine, but I got off of nicotine after I got off of weed. So I started using weed regularly, probably summer of 2020. And like the big thing for me is I always had a hard time sleeping. Like my brain just goes super fast, but it's always really difficult to get it to kind of calm down in the evening. Weed was like great for that, right? Because not only are you like not thinking an awful lot, you feel really good, and food also tastes really awesome.
Right.
So I kind of, and it was also one of the reasons I also had a hard time sleeping was because I was using a stimulant, totally not even thinking like, oh, that might be affecting my sleep. So I was on the typical uppers and downers, right? Like I had to smoke a bowl to go to bed, and then I'd put in a nicotine pouch and drink a cup of black coffee in the morning to get things going. Or well, not to get things going, but to get me going.
Right. Yeah.
And then I'd be so wired by the end of the day, I was like, now I got to smoke a bowl. So I got off of marijuana. My last time ingesting any kind of marijuana product or THC was November 13th, 2021.
Wow.
Big reason why was because I got COVID, and apparently that kicked my ass. And I'm like just recently starting to get that out of my lungs because I saw a detox nurse who does muscle testing. If you guys like, not medical advice, but muscle testing, that's all I'm going to say. Look into it and go do it, especially if your lungs don't feel good. But that was the big thing, is I was inhaling foreign substances, and like I was starting to get panic attacks because of it. And so I just had to get off of it. I just had to outright get off of it. And I had to outright relearn how to fall asleep, because I would just get so blasted that I wouldn't fall asleep. I just knock out. I just effectively lose consciousness. So right before you fall asleep, when your body when your muscles relax and your blood pressure drops, it's called like falling. And it's not just a feeling of like, sometimes you'll get the dreams like, oh, I'm falling. But like my body, because I was for a while, and I still kind of am wrestling with this irrational fear because of this. But there was a period in time where I was like really afraid of passing out because of there was actually one time I did pass out when I got super high, because I was in my friend's kitchen and his ex was there, and she was just yapping on about the most boring stuff. And when I'm high, I'm like way too polite. Like I don't want to do anything stupid. So I was just standing there. Next thing you know, my friend is like, wake up. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like on the ground. So I had a fear of passing out. And what ended up happening was, when I would experience that just before falling asleep, that falling sensation, my body thought I was passing out. Right. So I would like wake up with a panic attack, and like it's just an awful experience. It started to get better once I got off of nicotine. So I got off of nicotine on my last time using the nicotine pouches. So like the synthetic nicotine pouches was February 8th. And I actually was able to quit nicotine in a week.
Wow, dude.
In a week. And one reason why is I think I hypnotized myself. So that taps into the whole rewiring the subconscious mind that I talk about, which is an effective way to quit porn, and really any substance or anything that you're doing that's giving your brain more reward than it should, and it's becoming a problem.
Well, I think you're absolutely right too. Like they put like marijuana, they push that. I mean, I started with pot and then eventually went to heroin, and that's not everyone's trajectory, but most kids, like weed's okay. porn's okay. Like they keep pushing all these things on, and I have the feeling that it's to create psychological issues so they can sell you another pill from a pharmaceutical company somewhere
Sooner or
down the
later,
road.
yeah,
I mean,
right.
Viagra, dude, it makes, I'm sure you know, it makes billions,
Oh yeah,
billions. And all you can't go, I mean, podcasts have Blue Chew advertisements. You go to the Gap, they are selling these sex pills because we are doing this stuff to ourselves to, like you said, when you were a young kid already, there was issues.
oh yeah,
We're breaking our bodies, and then they can sell you the part-time cure.
right. Oh yeah, and also once I got off of weed, I was like, I'll be honest, I was the horniest I'd ever been in like a long time because I was totally suppressing my sex drive with that, totally suppressing it. And then even, it's like, and because like that's my whole thing, right? You don't watch porn because you're horny. You watch porn because you're hurting. Once you get off of porn, and like I have to walk my clients through this. Is like the first 2 weeks, you are not going to assume that anything is like horniness. It's emotional tension that you're trying to release. You release that, you'll feel better. And then what'll happen is your sex drive is going to start to return to normal. And then you'll actually experience like a physical desire. And it's also just a matter of rechanneling that energy, redirecting it and using it for good. But then like what ends up like I'm going to write a Twitter thread about this sooner or later, where the topic is going to be like, you do, like, as a man, you do not know what it feels like to have a sex drive if you're using alcohol regularly, if you're smoking marijuana regularly, if you're abusing stimulants regularly, if you're watching porn regularly. Like, you do not know, because the sex drive is outside of hunger and like thirst, right? It is the single most powerful driving force known to mankind, because like at the end of the day, we on a primal level, all we want to do is eat food because it keeps us alive. And we want to make babies because it keeps our gene pool alive.
Right.
We want to be fruitful and multiply, right? So that sex drive, if that can be dampened, because at the end of the day, it used to be, right, when we were a bit more of a moralistic, where we had more stronger morals, where we are, when, so like if you wanted to have sex, you had to get married and you were going to have babies. So you were going to build a family. You were going to leave behind a legacy. And now anymore, it's just like, oh, well, like, oh, it's been 7 hours since the last time I watched Pornhub, and I'm starting to feel a little tension.
Yeah.
And it's like, brother, dudes used to like wait it out.
For 18 years, they waited it out.
Right.
So go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, go on. You're good.
I was going to say my last question is what can what do you think that this is a plan? What is there a reason why this huge push for porn? Is it just profit? Is it just that's society? It's just degenerating into a more and more degenerate culture, or what do you think? Is there a reason at all? It's just happening with the internet.
Well, it depends on what rabbit hole you want to go down.
I want to all your rabbit holes. I love rabbit holes.
I mean, when you dive into what the porn industry brings about, and like people will say they've like ran the numbers and that porn doesn't fuel as much sex trafficking as they say it does, but like anymore now, that's where it's all really going towards. So I believe that porn is intentionally being used as a weapon to absolutely decimate masculinity, femininity, men, women, and children. I believe that not only is porn evil, I outright believe that porn is demonic in its nature. It's a vector of dark energy, and like the fact that we're supposed to just turn a blind eye to, like, like dudes, you guys will be watching, like, there's no way to tell how old she is. You don't know how old she is, and you don't know the circumstances of why that video was recorded. So the fact that you could be watching a 16-year-old being raped and you're absorbing that and you're taking that in, right? The eyes are the window to the soul. We're absorbing that. It's not good for the soul. It's not good for our energy. And as it's proven to not be good for the brain, it's not good for our emotional health. So is it for money? Absolutely. The porn industry brings in tens of thousands, or not tens of thousands. It brings in a lot of money.
Billions, yeah.
It brings in. I've seen one statistic. It's like a $96 billion industry annually. They bring in a lot of money.
Tons.
So
tons.
The whole, like, porn isn't free. It costs one tweet that I wrote that did well was porn isn't free because it costs your ability to look your daughter in the eyes and tell her she's beautiful. Like,
Wow.
as a dad,
Powerful.
sorry, you can't. Like, you mean to tell me you want to raise daughters, but you're literally Googling teen porn? Like, that's the stuff you get off to? Sorry,
Very true.
that doesn't work. That doesn't
No.
work.
No.
So I outright believe that, yeah, porn is being weaponized and it's being used, and it's what it is doing in the way that it's wiring people and changing the brain. It's outright evil. People will, what can you, like, I think you can have a beer here and there. I think you can smoke a cigar here and there. And I think you can smoke a J here and there. I do not think under any circumstances you should watch porn here and there. You know, and that at the end of the day, right, that comes down to you should be able to channel your sex. And it's not that difficult. It's just goal oriented. If you, at like the easiest way to frame it, right, to like kind of help people realize, like, oh, there's better things to do than watch porn.
Yeah.
Shocker, I know. Is like, okay, if you want to have sex, like if you actually want to have sex, ask yourself, what do you need to do to get closer to that? And then whatever the answer is, just make a conscious decision to channel that into it. If you are a little bit more morally swayed like I am, right, you know that that's going to come through marriage. So you got to ask yourself, what's going to get you closer to getting married? Okay, take that step, channel your energy into that and find fulfillment, right? It's long-term gratification versus instant gratification. It used to be that men would work hard. Now, all we have to do is plug into Fantasyland and all of our needs are met with either the type of a keys, the flick of a lighter, or the pour of a draft beer.
Oh, I like that. That's poetic.
Yeah, it's probably gonna be a tweet tomorrow.
Hey, that's a good one, dude. And that demonic thing, I totally agree with you. Like, what's the most popular porn? Like incest and stepbrother. And,
oh yeah, that's very common.
And you can't tell me that that's because they want you to do this. They want you to have sex
absolutely.
With your
family. That's a whole nother topic of sexual deviancy. I wrote a tweet where I said that porn is the gateway drug to pedophilia. I fully believe that it's being used to sway and change and make people attracted to things that they under no circumstances should be attracted to, because it hijacks the way the brain works. The brain needs more to feel the same way, right? Like you go from one drug to the next drug, because sooner or later that drug is not going to cut it for you, right? And then the same way is true with porn. Like, it used to be you could see like one tit and you'd be good to go, right? Yeah. And now anymore, it's like you got to watch the most messed up, demented stuff. Just terrible, terrible things. Like things that are just beyond
comprehension. I
don't like it's hard to even
right. And that's accessible to a 12-year-old boy. So and girls. Yes. So that's great. That's good. Society's looking up and up.
Right. We're doing a really good job, guys, raising our kids. Homeschool your kids.
So where can people find you? And if anyone's there's nothing to be ashamed of. It is a drug. Like, so.
Oh yes.
Katie is a perfect person. He's not going to jump, but tell everyone they can find you and all those good things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like, just to be totally clear, right? Like you had mentioned, I'm very heavy-handed when I speak against porn, but I'm one of the, well, I mean, I don't want to sound like conceited or too full of myself, but I've had dudes that have told, like I had one guy where he was on our coaching calls, because I do 4 1-hour calls with dudes. And he told me, or he wrote in the little testimonial, he's like, calls with David is just a homie trying to help you live your best life, or something to that extent. Right? Like, I get it. I've been there. I've done that. Right? I used to be into some pretty messed up stuff, and now I'm living my best life ever. So I think porn is evil, but if you want to quit, you absolutely can quit, and I would love to be the person to help make that possible. I would love to help you reach your porn-free life in 30 days or less. I'm currently only on Twitter. Well, I have a TikTok, but I don't even remember what my handle is. And like, I tried to grow. I hate TikTok so much.
Yeah. Right.
Such a time waster. So you can find me on Twitter at King David QPS. That's capital K on the King, capital D on the David, capital Q, capital P, capital S. Last I checked, I do have a search suggestion ban. So if you do look me up on Twitter, you probably have to do a little extra clicking to find me.
Wow.
But I'm 100% under at King David QPS, and I will never change my handle. I've contemplated doing it. I'm never going to. I've mentioned it too many times on podcasts. If you want to, you can send me an email, david@quitpornstrategies.com. Actually, you should probably just message me on Twitter. My DMs are open. And if you want to work with me one-on-one, quit porn in 30 days or less and live your best life ever, then you can enroll in my 31-day quit porn mastery program at enroll.quitpornstrategies.com. Watch the video, read the text, or just say, let's get this done, and click the green button, fill out an application, and work with me. If we're a fit, we'll hop on a call, and I'll get you started in the program. So again, you can find me on Twitter at KingDavidQPS, and then enroll.quitpornstrategies.com.
Dude, you're doing a noble cause, fighting for the men all everywhere. I love it. So I'll put all your links in the show notes and everything like that. And thanks for doing it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, man. I had a great time.
Awesome, dude. All right, see you. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk soon. Peace.